So hello everyone, welcome to today's KUASIA webinar. Today we are hosting Emek Yılmaz. So Emek got her PhD in sociology from Kangwon National University of South Korea. And she's currently a coordinator of Panorama 1326 Bursa Museum. Today, the title of her talk today is How do Municipal Museums Construct City Identity, Seoul Museum of History and Bursa City Museum. So first, Emek will give her talk, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So Emek, floor is yours.
Thank you, Burak. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity, and also welcome everyone. With this presentation, I aim to address questions such as why city museums need identity, and why cities need identity and how it is constructed, who constructs it, and whether these local governments, their ideological differences affect in this identity construction, and what is the roles of museums in constructing city identity? Are museums tools to convey messages, ideology, or other as instruments? And my argument is that liberal or conservative political approaches of museum administration impact curatorial work and museum narratives. While liberals focus more on contemporary events and care to protect it for the future, conservatives, on the other hand, focus on the preservation of the past also for the future. These are the two city museums. They are the first city museums of their respective countries. Seoul Museum of History was opened in 2002, and they updated their content and narratives in 2009. Bursa City Museum opened its doors to visitors in 2004, and since then it has not updated, but in a very near future they will update their exhibition content and narratives as well. In addition to this, it is important to note that this presentation attempts to explain these topics in a pre-COVID world. Now, some of the definitions I will go through may need reconsideration of how cities tackle global issues, including pandemics, and how ready they are to deal with these risks. As we are experiencing a third peak in Turkey and kind of a lockdown, I assume we all reconsidered where we live and what options are possible for us in other cities. Or maybe because how these cities deal with these issues are important. And for example, in Korea, it's one of the countries that have kept the curve flat and with a low number of COVID positive cases. So our experience in the cities we live made us think about the public transportation system. We use green areas the city offers, governance of cities by local governments as well as central governments. And although this is also important for now that how pandemic is managed. So back to the presentation again, some of the issues that I will focus today are globalization, cities and identity construction, museums and their role in identity construction, two case studies, discussion and conclusion. I hope to keep it brief. I will try and will skip if necessary. And so what is urban in a global context? According to Castells, a city is a place where mass communication takes place. Production happens, process happens in the regional or country scale, and distribution of products will take place between centers. Therefore, explaining urban space with production and distribution processes are not key factors. Castells also states that urban system can be understood via understanding spatial transformation in the wider context of social transformation. Space does not reflect society, it expresses it. It's a fundamental dimension of society, inseparable from the overall process of social organization and social change. Castells also emphasizes following key developments in spatial patterns and urban processes. Metropolitanization, which is the process of urbanization concentrated in metropolitan areas. Intensive population and capital are attracted to these areas. Advanced use of technology in transportation, and telecommunications, which cause simultaneous spatial concentration and decentralization, bringing a new form of networking between countries and metropolitan areas. Individualized and communalized social relationships, jeopardize patriarchal family relations, family culture, increasing individualized use of housing, public space, and neighborhoods. Urban areas become more multi-ethnic, more multicultural. Differences in income gaps in the urban areas increase, and communication patterns between individuals, cultures, and spaces collapse. Considering all of this, efficiency of services, environmental security, the quality of human resources, and the cultural integration of the people who live in and use the city are important to be able to compete in the global scale. According to Castell, the challenges of the previous century and this century are different. And the previous century, the challenge was assimilation of subcultures into dominant urban culture. But in this century, the challenge is sharing of the city by irreversibly distinct identities and cultures. So today's information society does not allow dominant culture to exist because only global media can convey dominant messages, and they selected to continue with the diversity and imposing common set of values rather than imposing common set of values. So the key question becomes not how to convey dominant culture, but how to communicate multiple codes. And the communication takes place in three different ways. This is physical, social, and electronic. And the physical communication refers to meaning-making process in urban areas with urban constellations. Social communication refers to transmission of messages, meanings, codes that are possible in public places because they are sites where spontaneous social interaction takes place. Electronic communication refers to virtual communities as networks of individuals contributing to virtual communities as networks of individuals contributing in transformation of sociability in the new metropolitan life. These are actually all defining museums. Museums are places where, in these two cases, we will see that they are actually trying to convey the dominant ideology and dominant culture, and they are constructing this their nationalist identity. And there are places of communication where physical and social communication take place. Museums are also places that help construct, easing or facilitating place attachment and place identity. Identity of a place has become an important tool for cities to secure a place in the global system. And from a sociological point of view, all identities are constructed. In this construction, they use building materials from history, geography, biology, from productive institutions, collective memory, and personal fantasies, power apparatuses, and religious revelations. But individuals, social groups, and societies process all these materials and rearrange their meaning according to social determinations and cultural projects that are rooted in their social structure and in their space-time framework. Castells proposes a hypothesis that in general terms, who constructs collective identity and for what largely determines the symbolic content of this identity and its meaning for those identifying with it or placing themselves outside of it, since the social construction of identity always takes place in a context marked by power relationships. And museums are places where curatorial work happens, and these curators are the key agents who decide on what to construct, what to narrate, and what to exhibit, and what to communicate. Museums' roles and in identity construction, most of the museum studies examine and aim to explain how museums construct identity, commonly national identity, and convey the idea to citizens through displays, conservation, interpretation, policy, and management, which are also the issues of museums. Many scholars point one of the role of museums is that they are places of meaning making. According to Giverno, there are 5 dimensions to national identity: psychological, consciousness of belonging to a community; cultural, which is identifying oneself with a specific culture, sharing bonds with its members; historical, because sharing a common past based on continuity, which contributes to the preservation of collective self via promoting a feeling of belonging to a glorious past. They used a selective use of history, which provides nationals with a collective memory. Curatorship exhibitions and narratives. Archiving and preserving historical objects are associated with future, whereas exhibitions are carried out for present. The museum and the exhibition serve as mediating occurrences between past and present. As stated earlier, collecting objects for preservation and exhibition, reconstructional narratives around these objects are product of a cognitive process. The meaning making is a mutual process carried out by the viewer and curator. Objects have functions and different meanings that can be interpreted by visitors. Our interpretations also emerge from a life course in which symbols, codes, meanings are constructed socioculturally. I'd like to give some background information on the data collection at both museums. It is important to note that this presentation aims to investigate and explain the methods of building city identity rather than comparing these two cities, because they are very different in terms of scales and functions from each other. Metropolitan city of Bursa is hardly comparable to the globally known financial, political, historical, and cultural city of Seoul. Both museums, as you can see on the table, that both museums agreed on conducting a research about city identity construction through museums, and allowed carrying out a survey and semi-structured interviews, but only Bursa City Museum accepted case study approach, including participant observation. I would like to give more information on how I was becoming close to a native in Bursa City Museum, and I stayed being an alien at the Seoul Museum of History. As we all know, gatekeepers are effective for researchers getting involved with group members in different levels. One can become a complete active participant in the field or going native, or one can take on slightly more detached role, where in my case, not an active in all aspects of the group and maintaining some distance from members. I joined in many activities of Bursa City Museum during this study, which was in 2013, and the Seoul Museum of History was in 2014. And the relationship was with Bursa City Museum was always a researcher and with other group members. Being an alien at the Seoul Museum of History was because several reasons involved, probably because I was a foreigner. I use this alien word it intended to be as a humorous touch, because in Korea, foreigners are actually, we had alien card as our identity card. So we were considered to be outsiders coming from somewhere else. But I think this is used by other countries as well, some other countries, if not all. The gatekeeper of the Seoul Museum of History was a real gatekeeper, and having intermediate Korean language skills at the time, I could not go any further of the provided relationship, and this also let him shape my positioning at the museum and also how the research would go. Therefore, he became the key informant, and he asked on interview and survey questions to be sent to him in advance. He decided on which ones to be asked and organized the meetings for interviews, and also the time provided. He said 10 minutes per each person, so nothing, no more. And I had to keep the timer also. I worked with an interpreter who was a graduate of Turkish language, and later we became friends. And the interviews, the selection of interviews at Bursa City Museum was easy because I talked to everybody, but at the Seoul Museum of History, it's a bigger museum, so the number of employees were more. So I only talked to the head of departments, and this was also provided by the gatekeeper. Also, he said that they know all the information. They would give you the right and proper knowledge, pass you the proper knowledge. So this is something, in fact, to send the questions and whichever questions in advance. The Seoul Museum of History. Seoul Museum of History belongs to the Seoul Metropolitan Municipality, which at the time of this research was governed by the left-wing Liberal Democratic Party, although in recent by-elections on April 8th, the rival conservative candidate from the People Party won the elections. I'm actually curious how this will affect whether it will affect the museum narratives or not. I believe it won't, because at the time I was there, Seoul Museum of History was independent. It belongs to it is affiliated to the Metropolitan Municipality, but it behaved independently. Museum holds permanent and temporary exhibitions, all related to the city of Seoul. The permanent exhibitions cover the start of Joseon Dynasty, which also refers to the selection of Hanyang, today's Seoul, as the capital of the new dynasty. Permanent galleries are comprised of 5 zones following historical chronology. Overall, it tells how the city grew and expanded greatly and became today's Seoul. The first zone, the Joseon capital, covers the decision of selecting Hanyang as the royal capital by the king. The history starts in 1392, and then city expands with city walls. The display items used in this zone are paintings, letters, maps, records of royal figures. And what we see in the picture is actually this one here. There is, if we know the social codes, we can understand that what is exhibited in a better way, in a detailed way. For example, this one is a head shop. They are making headgears here in this section. But what is this? This actually is the middle class, Jung-in, because the society during the Joseon dynasty was divided in 4 main classes, and by the headgear, one could understand and distinguish which class a person belonged to. The Yangban were nobles and aristocrats, Jung-in was the middle class, and Pyeongmin are commoners, and Cheonmin outcasts. This also reflects the Confucian values, formality, authority, and dignity. For example, in this shop, it represents the middle class worker and the hat he's making for the Jung-in. And in the second zone, the capital of the Han Empire. This zone represents the internationalization and the westernization, or connections with Westerns increase in this period. And the capital and so the dynasty was becoming more internationalized, and westernization of ideas, lifestyles were spreading over the city, as well as Western style buildings, and the use of electricity and petroleum. It is during this period that the international status of the state was elevated from Joseon Kingdom to the Han Empire in 1897. This period witnessed several treaties signed reciprocally between Korea and other nations. This also led Korea to internationalize its status, but also to open its borders to foreign goods and to other religions. Christianity started developing. against to Confucianism, but Confucianism prevailed, of course. Seoul steadily transformed into a city that was a mixture of East Asian and Western modernity, and several public parks appeared. In 1904, however, the Japanese military, which occupied the capital, dashed the hopes of the Han Empire. The third zone covers the Seoul under Japanese control, the shapes of modern urbanization. Narratives in this zone covered the Han Empire's annexation to Japanese Empire and the establishment of Japanese government general in 1910 in Seoul. All the administrative, judiciary, legislative, and military power was held by Japanese government general. Seoul, then was officially known as Gyeongsang, remained the capital. The headquarters of the Japanese colonial government was in Seoul, along with cultural institutions, schools, and major businesses. Many independence movements emerged in Seoul and in the whole country in order to tackle discriminatory Japanese policies. By the way, in these sections, these are all museum narratives that I'm trying to convey here, because I would like to discuss maybe later if we have time about how the museum is briefly constructing identity. In the next zone, the fourth zone, it is the independence from Japanese Empire and then development of Korea, but Seoul in this case. Narratives here, the fourth zone covers Korea regained its independence in 1945, and Seoul became the capital of the sovereign nation and earned special city status. However, many refugees returned from North Korea and masses of ethnic minorities returned to Seoul, which caused a rise in poverty throughout the city. In 1950, the Korean War broke out and left the city in ruins. After the ceasefire, Seoul underwent rapid economic development and began to transform into a huge modern metropolis. The construction industry advanced steadily with the pressing need for more water mains, sewage systems, roads, subways, housing, and schools to accommodate the explosive population growth. Building bridges on the Han River opened southern regions of the Han River to settlement, and this led to expansion of the metropolitan city with more industrialization, economic growth, democratization, and governmental decentralization, which is called the miracle on the Han River. This zone also covers the change in the lives of urbanites, some stemming from economic and technological development, international organizations such as Olympic Games in 1988, and the World Cup in 2002 that took place in Seoul, which overall indicates the worldwide recognition of Korea and Seoul in particular. This approach brought a civil war which lasted from 1950 to 1953. From independence from Japanese hegemony. After this division between South and, after the occurrence of South and Korea, South and North division, the South Korean state went into an authoritarian regime under the General Park Chung-hee, who was educated by the Japanese government general. He was fluent in Japanese language and also Japanese administrative culture, and came to power the 16th May coup d'etat in 1961. The urbanization, he was very committed to the development of this country, but he ruled over more than this dictatorial regime was present over 3 decades, but democratization movements were also spreading around, in the country. The fifth zone in the permanent galleries is the City Model Image Hall. It is located on the 3rd floor of the museum and opened in 11 August 2009. The hall is equipped with advanced multimedia technology and the large-scale miniature of the city. The hall was designed to display the present and the future of Seoul and to offer viewers a chance to experience the city in person. There are temporary exhibitions also, and most of them during the time I talked were targeting the contemporary events. The focus of many exhibitions is about Seoul as a space and place. The exhibitions usually cover the contemporary features of Seoul, and most of the exhibitions comprise events and places that still remain in memories of people who live in today's Seoul. Other museums, for example, make exhibitions about masterpieces, art's outstanding projects. The good side of, according to one of the interviewers I had, the good side of Seoul Museum of History is the influence upon people who endure Seoul, who experience the city, together with memory or events or places. One of the exhibitions that took place was about the Dongdaemun. This one on the left is the Dongdaemun Stadium, which was constructed during the Japanese Japanese regime, and this also had some traumatic memories for the people of Seoul, because the policy during the Japanese regime was discriminatory against Koreans. And after the demolition of this stadium, they, with the architect Zaha Hadid, they constructed Dongdaemun Design Plaza. And also it is important to note that the area was in poverty, so they wanted to regenerate this area with this demolition. The museum maintains its role as protecting records and memories for future generations to show that change happened and progress happens. Opened in 2002, as I said before, changed its exhibition content and narration in 2009. Different ages of people from 6 to 70 encounter and experience each other directly, and also the history of the city. Some people come and visit some parts of the museum frequently, again and again, which completes museum's role as public space. Here, they were really active, by the way, in terms of using technology, various techniques in this place. With computerized technology, they let visitors to have an interactive experience. There are especially interesting touchscreen stands for kids, and completing displays with stories, permitting them to take selfie pictures with a museum context, and etc. They also collect relics from public, and this increases sort of belonging to the city and creates a good relation with the museum. Cultural heritage originally is meaningful, but now such contemporary things are lost. Therefore, the art director said that they care about in this rapid social, environmental, urban change. It is important to collect contemporary events and their memories for future generations. He says contemporary history is very important, and he asked me about this Seoul accident, which was a ship sank in full about 300 students from middle school. It was really terrible, traumatic for the country, and these children died. And he says, 10 years later, it will be historical fact, and who will collect such material if nobody, whether somebody will collect or not. So we should make sure that it is collected. We should collect, arrange, manage, and inherit these materials to the future generations. Keeping the memory of contemporary historical events is necessary. As they also conduct many activities, museum activities, but important thing is that Seoul is becoming more internationalized each time, and they must provide, even though it is known as homogeneous single ethnicity with Koreans only, but it is becoming, especially the city Seoul, is becoming more internationalized, and it's becoming more multi-ethnic and multicultural. I think which is why the Seoul Metropolitan Municipality constructs their identity on togetherness, or working together, having fun together, enjoying together. And Seoul City Hall, Seoul Museum of History, they are not in very close relationship, in close terms. I mean, it doesn't mean that they don't get along well, but they don't really exchange views as it happens in Bursa City Museum. Two institutions, they had maybe some problems, but it was improving at the time. The arts director said that they are affiliated organization, but the cooperation is not going well. However, these days the works we do together increased, which was in 2014. And so, especially for searching and listing heritage of Seoul in the UNESCO World Heritage List, their cooperation was improving more. And about Bursa, the first city archives of Bursa. Bursa is the first city museum in Turkey. And it was actually because of the Turkish Historic Towns Association. They recommended Bursa Metropolitan Municipality to open the first city museum in Bursa because of the at the time in 1999 and 2000 there was this Europe Common Heritage meetings, so this was one of the first attempts to open the first city museum. And they said in order to highlight its Ottoman character, because it's the first capital of Ottoman Empire, let's build a city museum. Following this meeting, they started collecting donations and objects, and the city museum opened in 2004. The Bursa Metropolitan Municipality is governed by the ruling Conservative Justice and Development Party. And unlike Seoul Museum of History, the museum has a close connection with the municipality. And in fact, the director of the museum was also consultant of the mayor at the time of this research. Bursa City Museum aims to be a museum challenging the prevalent perception on museums object-oriented exhibition, organizing places, and to become people-oriented places, combined libraries, archives, where several arts and cultural activities take place, such as concerts, film screenings, workshops, temporary exhibitions, etc. The museum, as it is an institution of the municipality, takes part in some of the organizations of the citywide activities of festivals of the municipality. Exhibition-related activities carried out at the Bursa City Museum consist of permanent and temporary exhibitions. In addition to exhibitions, the museum runs various educational activities and a project called Urban Citizenship Awareness, which is co-executed with several other municipal organs. The exhibition galleries are, for example, in this one, the pre-Ottoman period is given a very, very small space, as if it was just, either it seems like there is not much information on that period, or it's the cognitive selection process that they didn't want to give much emphasis on that period. The next, in the entrance floor, in the ground floor, the exhibition starts with the Ottoman period, because Bursa has become, it is emphasized by directors or administratives of the museum that Bursa has become an important city because of the Ottomans. It wasn't Iznik, or it wasn't Istanbul, so the city became important and developed with Ottomans. And after this part starts with Osman Gazi and comes until the Independence War. It is one of the biggest exhibition hall in the museum. The next period covers Republican period and Atatürk and Bursa. These are all the it's. I don't want to say exactly the continuation chronological. This part is chronological, but I think there is also, I argue, there is also some sort of plan to keep it. Well, we give this much space for the Ottomans, but we also give this much space to Republicans. That's my argument. And there was another meeting at the there was a meeting of Turkish Historic Towns Association, and they one of the person came from, I think, from eastern cities of Turkey, and asked the question that why do you have so much why do you emphasize so much on Ottoman history but not other sections? Is it because of your ideological stand? But I asked this question also to other people. They said, for example, one of them said, one of the key persons, that this exhibition design process actually began during the before the ruling party, today's ruling party, came to power. It was actually during Democratic Left Party, which was a central left party. Then at that period, they thought about designing these exhibitions. But the municipality emphasizes and highlights the city's Ottoman identity at the museum and all around the city. They also spare considerable space to national independence war. And it is, as I said, attempt to establish a sense that society for claiming both periods equally. There is this urban citizenship awareness project, and they, in that sense, they want to, because there are some, Bursa is a migrant city. People from different cities of Turkey migrate to Bursa to work for a better lifestyle. And there is this concern over, there is this disconnection between these migrants and the locals. So we need to construct and convey this local codes to newcomers. So that's why they want to create Bursalı, or someone from Bursa, being from Bursa, sense of Bursalı, let's say. And in the upper floor, the first floor, there is on the one left, focuses on lifestyle of Bursa in the 19th century, this part. This one is from the one floor down. What do you call it? It is the historical artisan street. It is actually, when you get in there, it gives a very nice sense, but there is no chronological connection as there is in Seoul Museum of History. Here, there are concepts like, for example, here the bathing culture. Here is a place from a house, and then this is a school, how people used to live, and etc. There are concepts, and they exhibit collections in a nice way. Or here, the artisan street. Bursa was a trade center, so we understand that, but there is no connection between exhibition halls. Whereas in the Seoul Museum of History, you start from Joseon period and come until today. I mean, let's say 2002, but it is 2009, and it is constructing some kind of continuation and sustainability and development. You can come till today and see or question how the life has changed since the beginning, or social life, for example. It was then different social classes, but how those social classes became a more equal society, how it ended like that. There are also temporary exhibitions, but most of these temporary exhibitions were focusing on historical characteristics of the city, different than Seoul Museum of History. In recent years, the themes have become more contemporary, though. Educational activities are important. Workshops, especially targeted to primary and middle school children, exist. They are very nice, by the way. And it aims to convey urban citizenship awareness by learning tangible and intangible cultural heritage of Bursa. I also conducted a survey with visitors, although it was different in Seoul Museum of History. Here, the role of Bursa, I asked this to people, visitors, whether they also think that museums are places of constructing city identity. In Turkey, in Bursa, it seems like we agree with everything, and it conveys city identity, narrates history of the city, transfers the memory of the city, promotes place attachment. It's an educational research institution, connects individuals with society, promotes social and cultural awareness. It is all accepted by the population. It was 102 people joined in this survey. How about what? And on the opposite side, within Seoul Museum of History, the population only almost only accept that it narrates the history, and maybe they agree with others, but mostly they abstain from giving opinions. This was interesting for me. I wonder why. I mean, maybe they haven't given a thought much, so they wanted to just stay out of it, but it's interesting. The other question was city identity. Bursa is an early Ottoman heritage city. This is what the question asked, and they strongly agree with this given statement. And the city slogan of Seoul, it is that we stand together, and they agree because it is seen everywhere, and so it's not possible to not know, but also there is still, we are not sure. Maybe it was because I couldn't meet respondents, so I couldn't explain if there was misunderstanding. I couldn't explain what the situation would be. So I also couldn't conduct a pilot study in the museum because of the gatekeeper. He wanted to organize the group. He didn't let me do the research by myself. Anyways, participants show that identical feature of the cities before participants' idea on descriptive identical feature of the cities before the established identity by the local governments. There's another one. I think I missed showing that. Oh, this one. In this one, I don't ask, but I ask them to pick one. In your opinion, which word below would complete the blank? Bursa is there, and people picked Ottoman city or historical city. And here, actually, we thought of giving global city, but it would become the global city or international city, metropolitan city. It would be metropolitan city all over. So we decided to keep historical, to keep it more identical with the Bursa case. Asked more or less the same questions. So here, people think that the historical city is okay and arts and culture more, but in this other, they also stated that global city or metropolitan city again. And the differences between municipal implementations, as mentioned earlier, today cities are not the center of production and distribution. These processes take place between production centers, which happen around city, peripheries, in regions or in the country. metropolitanization is an important part of understanding urban processes. Seoul and Bursa are two cities where industrial production came to a saturation point. Both cities are metropolitan. Of course, Seoul is more metropolitanized, and Bursa has less capital and population concentration than Seoul. Urban space involves museums, particularly in this case, city museums, where while social organization, social change occur and society expresses itself with its consumption patterns through preferring to come and spend their time in there. It also displays organization of the city and social changes that occurred in the city. Therefore, city museums are places where urban system is abstracted and represented. In Seoul, by highlighting historical, modern, scientific, and technological phase altogether, conservation of cultural monuments, renovation of historical constructions, along with urban redevelopment plans to provide better housing and neighborhood experiences, and various numerous leisure activities scattered all around the city, offers a dynamic, vivid life and 24 hours open places in several parts of the city to different people, different communities. There is always movement in Seoul. Through these activities, the mayor at the time aimed encouraging the public to participate in activities which fosters national pride and sense of unity. This adds to the social stability of the city. The ultimate goal of Seoul Metropolitan Government is to create an innovative culture by creating a culture of creativity in the city. Whereas Bursa, by only highlighting her unique historical character, targets those who are interested in history as a visitor, locals who align themselves with historical past and actually basically to preserve their heritage. Museums are criticized for being functioning institutions of dominant ideology as long as they contribute to the cohesion and reproduction of capitalist society. This approach can be observed in two city museums, both which reconstruct national identity at the local level, creating sense of place attachment for citizens and feeling of national belonging, but only for those who align themselves with the mainstream dominant national identity. Therefore, one of the arguments is that first Ottoman and second Republican identity reference causes exclusion and so detachment from the place for some groups. And there is also, for example, in Bursa City Museum, there is the part for non-Muslims in the Ottoman times. But how about now? Where are they? But I asked this to the person in the art historian, and she said they also had a study with them, but they wanted to be invisible. They don't want to be seen in the museum either. And for example, LGBTI plus communities, they are not existing, so their identity is not seen in these museums, as well as in the same happens in Seoul also. There is no significant difference between two museums' approach to the present. The Bursa City Museum uses history as a means of constructing identity, and the historical past is perceived in a nostalgia, whereas the Seoul Museum of History more focused on history, pointing what the city had gone through and has become what it is today. It's a global city advanced in technology use and production, and also plans to be the center of creative, sustainable green technology. Both museums need to catch up with recent developments of their cities in their displays and tell about internationalization of their cities. A common feature of both museums' galleries is that chronological narratives of exhibitions, and well, in 2002 and 2009, it's especially in this time when there is this quick change, but depends also on the curatorial preferences of museums. Another common feature of two cities is demolishment of the stadium. In Bursa also there is the demolishment of Atatürk Stadium, and now it became Millet Bahçesi. It's like a public garden, and which was located at the center of Bursa. The technology since 2002 has advanced and the use of it in the city has increased. There have been good urban development projects, but also mistakes such as erecting 15-story Toki buildings in the center of the city, shadowing over historical district of Bursa, should also be narrated in the museum. To conclude, constructing city identity consciously in Bursa City Museum, unconsciously or without an agenda in Seoul Museum of History, takes place in both city museums. It is a sub-level work of national identity to national identity construction. It follows the same path, except for it focuses more on local features, but in accordance with national history and identity. The place's contribution at the national level is important. How much effective the city was in nation-building process became more important. This is valid in the national level. The city can become an important and well-known in the country. There is still, I mean, I skipped this. To conclude with my argument in the beginning, I said liberal approach focuses more on contemporary, and while conservative focus more on the past experiences. But I think there is also another point that should be noted, that, for example, the art history education and our perception on museum work, whether our approach is conservative or not, that also affects the focus on past and present for future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elif. Thank you, Emek, pardon. So, floor is yours. If you have any questions, please ask. Actually, yeah.
Hocam, you can start.
Okay. Okay, so my question is, the Seoul Museum of History. It was, its construction started in 1985, if I'm not wrong, right?
Yeah, it was, yes.
So it's
pardon.
So it's right in the middle, or at the end of this, democratization process, right, between 1980 and 1987. So it's not a very good example to compare, let's say, museum making, the idea of representation through museums in the park regime and in the democratic era. So because it started with it started after democratization, but probably other examples, other museums in South Korea. And so how do you compare their ways of representation during that the era of military dictatorship and during the democratic era?
Yeah, actually,
how do they transform?
The Seoul Museum, it is topic that comes to why I started studying about museums. In the first year of my as a Korean government scholarship student, I was in Korea learning only Korean language, and the government took us from city to city to visit cities and learn about the culture. And I visited several museums, and these are the basic. In Daegu, in the southern city of Daegu, for example, there is the Japanese period, Japanese Empire, the rule over Korea is very significant in terms of identity construction. There is always this social movements, independence movements locally, established locally, and they always show about this in the museum. But then, for example, there is also part that democratization. Koreans are proud people with their nationality. And for example, this Seoul Museum of History, the construction began earlier. The idea was to open it in 1988 for the Olympic Games, but it didn't happen. And the impact of, from what I understand, in the municipality doesn't perceive it, in case of Seoul Museum of History, doesn't see it as a political tool to express or convey messages, but it is a heritage work. I think it's not seen as a significant tool at that time for a democratization process, but they tell about the process mostly based on the development, how the country developed from since 60s until 2002, I think. But it is always the same topic in many museums I visited. There is these periods, even national history museums of the country focus on these periods. Of course, it is normal. Seoul is the capital of the country, so it is, of course, okay to have this parallel work. But I can't. What was the question? I think I just spread all different topics again.
Okay. I mean, I was curious about, other museums, like, from the park era to the, democratic era and today, like, what kind of transformations did they sort of go through?
The first museum in Korea was opened in 1909, so they don't have a very. It was the palace, the Royal Museum, and then converted into during the Japanese rule. It was converted to the general. I can't remember now, but after that, it is the history of museums in Korea it's not like in Europe, for example. It doesn't have as 2 centuries of history.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of national history museums, they are also covering the same topics in the same way. That's for sure, I can say.
Okay. Other questions? You can raise your hand or you can speak right away. Yeah, Burcu has a question.
Hi, Emek. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Hocam. My question is about, your presentation is brilliant about what is exhibited and the way it is exhibited. But my question is where these collections are exhibited. The building itself, what they say about the history of city or within your research, because some buildings are converted to museums later. Can you say more about buildings itself where these museums are located?
Yes, of course. Thank you, by the way, Burcu. Here we see on the left Seoul Museum of History, Seoul Pakmungan. And this is a new museum, but the location is historic, and it is in the center of the city where Gyeongbok Palace is present. It is very touristic area. It is the financial center of the city, and there is the headquarters of many companies, and there is the Cheonggyecheon stream. It is very city where the attraction happens, but in this sense that it's not like Gangnam area, but on the other hand, it's the historic city, part of the city. But the building was especially constructed for the museum. On the other hand, Bursa City Museum, it was the, what do you call, defterdanlık? Let me see that. Just a minute, please. This area is called Heykel. It's the center of the historic city, the old Bursa. Especially with the Republican period, this center was developed. And this is built in early 20s during the Republican period. So it is a historic city, and which is why, because they collect this Bursa City Museum as well as Seoul Museum of History, accept donations from people. And so Bursa City Museum has a limited space, but has a very rich collections, and almost all of them came with working with the neighborhoods, and also people voluntarily came and donated their belongings to the museum. So they have a very rich collection, but the space is limited and converted to a museum to protect its historic identity of the building.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Aiko, please. Yeah.
Hello, thank you for this very interesting talk. I have a question about the target audience, and especially whether the museum organizers have in mind the international audiences, and especially if so, then how is it reflected in the exhibits themselves, or maybe in the use of languages? Have you noticed any of those efforts in either or both of these museums?
Yes, thank you. Bursa City Museum exhibition, all narratives are in Turkish, and they have this what is it called, with their earphones, they put it, they listen in English, they can listen to in English, but the narratives in the museum, visible narratives are in Turkish only. There is, of course, international tourists that come and visit the museum, but it is not very, from what I heard from my friends, because I took them to visit the museum and let me know their opinion about, and they said, for example, that there was not connection between exhibition halls, one of the idea, and that sometimes it was difficult for them to connect the exhibited object with the history of the city. And Bursa City Museum, in fact, targets the locals as the target group is the locals, because they really work on constructing this urban citizenship identity. And even today, now they work mostly with Syrian migrant population, and they continue, even though there is this sometimes language barrier, but still they continue to convey these codes to Syrian migrants. On the other hand, Seoul Museum of History exhibits, the exhibition narratives are all in 4 languages. It's Korean, English, Chinese, and Japanese, all of them. It's a very good work, in my opinion. And Seoul receives a lot of tourists. So I think it is not only, for example, I remember one case. There was this American man was visiting, and we had a very short talk. And he said that he would be really, I mean, he's curious, but also at the same time very sad if a Japanese would visit this museum, because it was very sensitive. It is a sensitive subject for Korea, but the way that it is exhibited is very impactful. And for the Seoul Museum of History, the target groups is everyone, because they really it is this, they have exhibitions on the, for example, women issues, and they had it when I was there. And there is this working class exhibitions, and the Dongdaemun complex, the stadium at the time of it was a stadium before demolition, and it always tries to reach out to different parts of society, different fragments of society. I hope I answered some.
So any other questions? Okay, so if not, we can close the meeting. So thank you so much, Emek, for this very interesting and informative presentation, comparing museums in Seoul and Bursa. And so we'll have other webinars in the coming weeks. So I hope to see all of you in these coming presentations. So have a good day.
I also want to thank you all again. Thanks a lot
Yeah.
for being with me. Bye.
Bye and have a good day.